Hey Anton, welcome back.
Hello there. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, um, it the last time was fun, and what I saw on Blue Sky is your recent creation with 1.5k circles.
Interesting. Yes, I do publish them sometimes. So I do drawing
Mhm.
sometimes with unexpected tools. Uh, People think that I generate the pictures, but I actually draw them using a compass and a pen.
Circle, right?
Yeah.
Mhm. But I saw this, and with a circle, 1,500 circa circles, right? And what what would be interesting, fun, to make a picture of it and write software to find out how many circles there are. This would be interesting whether it is possible to take a picture and say, okay, this no, in this picture there are 1,500 circles, or have a counter. Even this would be fun.
That I think I tried it. I mean, not by recognizing the picture, but of course, when you generate it using
Mhm,
some programming language, it's a iterative process. It's easy to count how many figures or
mhm,
elements there are. But it would be also interesting if you take a picture and by the shape of it
mhm,
would estimate, not really recognize each
mhm,
circle like individually, but estimate using
mhm,
the diameter and the layout of
mhm,
the drawing how many elements there could be.
mhm.
That's also interesting way.
And the question is how you do this, because you have to move the circle by millimeter or something, right?
Right.
How you can be so exact? So I mean,
Yeah, so how does it look like? Imagine you draw a circle on a paper,
mhm,
right? You have a
mhm,
reasonably big circle on a paper, and now you want to draw a number of other circles on the same line on that circle. So the initial circle is your layout, and now you want to draw as many circles as you can on top of that circle.
mhm,
Um, so to do that, you can do it in a naive way. You put a needle in some place.
mhm.
You draw one circle, and then you move this needle by some fraction of a millimeter or by some interval, and
Yeah, and it has to
try.
be fraction of a millimeter, because millimeter is too much. So how it looks like it, you are maybe tenth of a millimeter or something like this, right?
No, it's actually around 1 millimeter.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's a visual effect that makes it look like it's a very thin interval, but
Okay.
it's actually not. But even then, if you start going into millimeter fractions, I mean, like you first time you put zero point 0.9, the second time you are not so precise, you're not a machine, you're a real human, you would put 1 millimeter, and next time it would be 1.1, and then zero point 0.9 again. So
Hmm.
the intervals start floating, and you may think of yourself then as of a random generator.
Hmm.
That is why the final result doesn't look so precise and not so machine made, and you see those deviations, and then the final curve that is composed from those circles looks like a floating figure. I don't know, but the
Hmm.
way I do it, I try to minimize those deviations
Hmm.
between the intervals by using how you call it, a compass with two needles. So I
Hmm.
have two needles, and I have this compass fixed with a special clamber.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
call it like that, probably, so that even if I press it too much, then it doesn't change the interval between the two needles. So I'm able to create reasonably equal intervals through the whole layout without changing the fractions of
Okay.
those intervals. It still is, there are still some microns that are different, so you're not able still to produce a machine looking drawing
Hmm.
as if
Hmm.
you did that with a programming language on canvas. But that's the beauty of it. I mean,
But what would be interesting, I don't know how precise printers are, whether it is possible to be more precise than a printer, because the printer, if it prints with the ink, there's also some deviations, I guess. They cannot be, exactly the same. So there is no temperature variations or whatever. So maybe with your approach, you are more precise than a computer with a printout. You know what I mean?
I
Because the
try.
printer also has some deviations. So
No, I tried that. Printer is more precise. I'm not able to
so I'm
create.
disappointed. So the printer
Yeah,
is more precise than Anton.
yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. And how many circles can you do per hour?
Oh, I haven't counted that. Actually, it depends how you draw them, because the speed depends how many breaks you have to do. Imagine if you make a one circle with one movement, right?
Hmm.
That's the fastest you can do. And if you put the needle into the next hole that you made, like up front, then you do like the full circle again. That's the fastest speed you can get. But if you want to make intersections where you have to break your line, break your
Hmm.
movement of this, turning around the
Hmm.
compass, then it slows down very much. And on the complex drawings, it means that they get much slower. Like you get much slower
Hmm.
speed on producing this. But if you think of this naive use case where you just do the circles, I think you can do about 20 circles a minute.
Okay. So
So
the picture for the last time was roughly 1 hour, and you were ready. So 1.5 hour.
no, the one that you saw is probably 3 hours, because
Okay.
you are not doing it like all the time. You're doing it as part of some, I don't know. I'm watching a movie usually when I'm doing this. So
Ah.
I'm sometimes watching the screen, then I'm doing a few circles, then I drink coffee, I'm doing some other circles, and so on. So it's kind of a meditation process. It's just time filling. It's not
Hmm.
something I do. I sit down and produce the drawing. No, I never do it like this.
Hmm. And you do the holes in the paper up front, so you
Yes,
know where you go. Okay. And how you do them with
with the two needles, like with the,
still
yeah,
okay. So
right.
you do the with two needles the holes, and then you are producing the circles. Interesting process.
Yeah, so
So
I first create the layout, so I know where the line will be, and I know
okay.
I have all the lines. Sometimes I want a very hectic layout that is, produced with curves. They don't have any relations, and so on. So it's just a random form.
Hmm.
Or sometimes I create geometric layouts so that where all the intervals and all the things are symmetric. Uh, Somehow measured and so on. There's like geometry, really.
Hmm. And listeners could buy your work, right?
Uh, Currently, I don't put it anywhere on Etsy or anything. If they really want it, they can contact me and ask for it. I will send the drawing to them. Yes, I have sold a few drawings, but not on the internet. I have
Okay.
had a few exhibitions in my city where
Hmm.
I live. I think three of them. Uh, Luckily, it's like every next exhibition is larger than the previous one,
Very
so
good.
that might have two indications. It's like the indications of two things. I'm drawing new drawings, that's the first indication, and people don't buy them as fast as I draw them. So I have the number of drawings growing, so the exhibition is growing as well.
One idea, right? We have to talk to Stefan Jansen and stuff like that. So you could have an exhibition at a conference,
Hmm. That's a
Devox, for
nice,
instance.
nice idea. Nice idea.
You should to ping him. No, no kidding. Because I mean, for developers, if I look at this, I was curious how you're doing this and why, right? So, and this is just put it just for the discussion. This would be a Devox Belgium would be great. So we have to ping Stefan, and yeah.
let's try that. Yes, I will ping Stefan next time. But why, the question why, I started when I was a kid, in the 90s. So I
Hmm.
had this, I saw it for the first time. Some teacher showed me that, and I tried it, and I had this motivation then. So people liked it, what I produced. And for a few years, I was drawing it. And at that time, we didn't have so nice tools, such sophisticated tools. So I was actually drawing them with ink, and it was much more time consuming than today with pens, right?
Hmm.
Today pens can produce the line that looks like ink,
Hmm.
but it's virtually impossible to make a mistake with ink. A single mistake makes your work void, so it
Yeah.
just breaks it.
I wanted to ask you about the pencil or pen. Is it like the regular one, like from wood, or is just, at the end you have just the graphite?
It's the how they call it, unipin or tint pen or pigment pen, they call it
Ah,
like that.
this is like, the fine print which is used for architecture drawings.
Yes.
The from Rotring, I think, right? There's one company which does that. Okay, we had to use that at school, for the architecture drawings. There's like the very fine one, 0.5 or whatever, 0.3 or whatever. That there's a
Hmm.
different, Okay, so it's not like graphite one. It's like the fine print for the architecture work, right?
Exactly, yes.
And how fine is it in your case?
uh 0.1 is the one
Wow.
that I'm using the most. There
Hmm.
is 0.05 as well. The size actually doesn't tell you much, because I noticed that different vendors with the same size produce the different line.
Hmm.
From one vendor you may take zero point 0.1, and then from the other one 0.05, and it will be the same.
Hmm.
So it totally depends, and sometimes it also depends on the paper, like
Hmm.
on the surface of the paper.
Hmm.
It affects the final line quite a lot.
Hmm.
So yeah, I try to use as thin as possible.
Hmm.
Then the final result, if you try to draw them, if you try to draw as many elements as you can with a very high density, then it looks very nice.
Hmm.
But sometimes I use thicker pens as well, just for more granular
Hmm.
drawings, granular shapes. Then there's less elements, but they are more prominent. And in some environment, with some conditions, with some light conditions, they will look better.
Would be interesting even to vary. You could have a thin, a little bit more. Then you have like a breathing. You could have a different, pens at the same time. In one, there's more work, but you can switch between the. I don't know whether it will look good or not. If the pattern would be the same, also like repeating pattern could look good or not, right?
Yes, I try to do these variations, but it's also more time consuming,
Yeah.
right? So I for instance tried playing with colors.
Hmm.
Uh, let's say blue and red can
Hmm.
produce, when you draw them just side by side and you look at them, you wouldn't notice that. But once you have a lot of circles with the two different colors, and you step back from the wall where this
Hmm.
drawing is hanging, then you will see that the third color is appearing,
Hmm.
and that's a very nice effect. So I
Yeah,
tried that as well.
kind of mixing.
Hmm.
So why we are talking is, I mean, this is not the interesting topic now. A little bit boring now. You are in the room where Kotlin was, how to call it, not invented, rather than introduced, right? Or
Right. Yes.
how it happened that you were in the room, and why you were in the room, and what was your reaction, and what was your initial thought?
Oh, that's a cool question. That's really a story of my life. So, for the context, I'm a developer advocate in Kotlin team, right? And this is where the story starts. So, in 2011, right? So,
Hmm.
in 2011, Used to work for a company called Zero Turnaround, and we used to build a tool called JRebel, and the tool that reloads classes on the fly. So we did a lot of bytecode instrumentation, and there used to be and still is an event called JVM Language Summit, which is
Hmm.
by the name of it refers that there will be a lot of talks on the language design, and not only Java but everything around the JVM. But in fact, it also refers to tooling.
Hmm.
So that's why I kind of got there. It's an invite only event, so you don't really buy a ticket and go there. So you have to apply, and then they confirm if you can come or not. And in the room, you have like around 70, 80 people
Hmm.
altogether. So in 2011, if you recall what year that was exactly 1 year after Oracle acquired Sun,
Hmm.
and that was the time when we were waiting for Java 7 release, where we supposedly had to get lambdas. We didn't get them. We got just the invoke dynamic instruction, and we got lambdas with all the other APIs around it in Java 8. But that was also the time when everybody was so unsure about what is happening to Java, and how it will evolve, and what Oracle will do, and so on. And because Invoke Dynamic was about to be introduced, a lot of languages were either revealed by the companies who were building them.
Were you unsure? Because my back then, what I remember my feelings was I was okay. What I suspect is now we get full power ahead, 2 years, and then it will be dropped. So my suspicion was the next 2 3 years they will achieve more than it sometimes because everyone is motivated, there is a budget left or whatever, and then we'll maybe cancel it completely. So this was my fear, what I had. But I was pretty sure about 2011 to 2015 maybe, and then I was not that sure what happens after 2015. So this was my personal.
I didn't have my personal opinion about this. It was just the sentiment that the others had. My
Mhm,
impression from around
mhm,
uh, when I was talking to the other folks, did they feel at that time?
mhm,
And yeah, so basically at that event, most of the talks were either the other languages, like or reincarnations of the languages, implementations of the on the JVM, like Jython, JRuby,
mhm,
those scripting languages, making use of invoke dynamic and reporting what kind of achievements do they get by
mhm,
using it. Or some other companies were revealing or talking about their brand new or just emerging language. Like,
mhm,
for instance, Gozu, the JVM language Gozu, was revealed, but it wasn't new. It
mhm,
was like from about 10 years old by that time already. It was just
mhm,
some internal language at some company. And then Ceylon was there,
mhm.
but
By
everybody
Gavin
knew.
King, right? I guess.
Yes, Gavin wasn't there, but someone from the team was there, and then JetBrains came there. Andrei Breslov and Dmitry Jemerov. They are both not at JetBrains anymore, but they
Mhm,
were the two folks behind Kotlin language, and they revealed the new project by JetBrains that was with a temporary name called Kotlin.
mhm,
The name was temporary because they weren't sure that it's the name stays, but seems that everything temporary is actually very persistent. So they said, yes, we have this idea, and we have some experience building tools for the languages, and now we have this idea that we need a better Java. So that was the initial idea behind creating a new language which is statically typed and general purpose. It wasn't that, hey, we are building a new language for Android. That's the sentiment a lot of folks have about Kotlin, that hey, it was created for Android. No, it wasn't. In fact, in the beginning, it wasn't even capable to run on Android because the bytecode it produced was mimicking Java C,
Hmm.
and the tools for Android actually were more strict in some
Hmm.
places, so the bytecode wasn't passing the verification by those tools. But anyways, that was fixed in the early releases anyway. But then my impression of all those new languages that were revealed was that when I came back, I was discussing it with colleagues, and everybody was on the same page basically with their opinion about it. Is that it doesn't make sense. I mean,
Hmm.
we're gonna get lambdas soon in Java. This is all we miss in Java,
Hmm.
just lambdas, and
Hmm.
we'll be fine. That's the only criteria
Hmm.
that uh, sets Java apart from the other new languages. And now the irony of this story is that 10 years fast forward, I am a developer advocate in Kotlin team,
Hmm. Was
advocating
the
for
feedback
Kotlin.
the feedback you got in the room was from the language Java language engineers or the attendees? Because I think because the Java language engineers they know as they try to push Java forwards. And my opinion is they exactly know what Java is missing, right?
Yes, I think people just even don't realize how much they know and how much they have considered and how many details they have to juggle around to actually make the changes to the language and
Hmm.
be sure about the sustainability of the language evolution. And but the feedback I was talking about is
So
uh,
why you were there and were you introducing Kotlin or were you listening to the introduction?
I was listening to the introduction. I wasn't part of the team at that time,
Okay.
right?
And
I
why you
was
were at the summit?
because we were building this advanced tool for Java class replacement, and
Ah, okay. Hmm.
we wanted to send one person every year,
Hmm.
and that person appeared like just happened to be me at that
Okay.
year, so
Okay.
it was a
That's interesting story.
coincidence,
Okay. That's really interesting. So, because
right?
what I understood the last time is that you attended a secret meeting at JetBrains headquarters. So, but this was the
No,
JVM language summit, and you were just attendee, and this was proposed by JetBrains engineers, right?
right, right.
So now, why the JetBrains engineers got time to implement Kotlin? I mean, because this is like, I mean, this has to be justified. So what was the idea back then?
Uh, I don't know exactly the idea when they discussed it in the secret room, right?
Hmm.
But I think the first announcement that is still in the blog that was written by Dmitry still holds. Like,
Hmm.
first of all, we have the experience, we have the skill. I mean,
Hmm.
the company and the team has the skill to build something that would impact the industry, and that thing could be a programming language. So you from the company, from big commercial company point of view that produces tools for developers, we earn money from our licenses, right? um,
So okay,
building something.
maybe you can talk about this. How big is JetBrains? Because I cannot. I thought this is like, but I mean, how many people are involved there?
Currently I think it's over 2,000 people
Wow.
altogether.
So this
Yeah.
is actually, because I had the first JetBrains license, I think in 2002, and this was like small boutique company. So, but 2000 is
Yes,
yeah.
I joined in today when we are
Hmm.
recording this webinar. I'm marking my 6th year at JetBrains,
Okay.
and when I joined, it was 750 people,
Okay.
and now it's 2023,
Hmm.
and now it's over 2,000 people. I think
And what they are
2,000
doing, all the people, I
something.
mean, Twitter is also had lots of engineers, right? But the
Right.
question is this like you building tools, marketing, or what? I mean, 2000 is a huge. You could build an operating system with 2000 people, I think.
Right, and surprisingly, a huge percentage of those people are actually developer engineers,
Okay.
developers, and they build various IDEs, various tools for developers, and like also the programming language. Of course, the
Hmm.
Kotlin team is pretty big. It's over 100 people. It
Hmm.
feels like a lot. Like, why would you need so many people for just building
Hmm.
the language? But if you try to see how many components there are, It's actually not a lot at all,
Hmm.
uh, because there is a compiler, there is tooling, there is the ID, there are different backends for the compiler, meaning different platforms. The JVM is just one of them.
Hmm.
Also native, also JavaScript, also WebAssembly, which
Hmm.
is just turned to into alpha status. So now you can target WebAssembly with Kotlin. So and
Okay.
and and all the other things that quality assurance,
Hmm.
Gradle plugin, some
Yeah, yeah, you're
core
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a
libraries,
huge
and so on.
ecosystem. Yeah.
Right,
But this is interesting. So 100 people on Kotlin, so I would suspect it is absolutely comparable to people developing Java at Oracle, right? So I mean, if you compare, the amount of engineering, so it is actually you could. I mean, this is a huge dedication to a language, right? This is
right.
similar what Sun did back then. So this is not, and not. I would say, is there any other example? Maybe .NET and Microsoft, right? But there is no other example where there is a commercial language. So I would call it commercial, like Java, Kotlin, because it's backed by a commercial company somehow. Of course, it's open source, but it was similar to beginning of Java and Sun. Now we have Kotlin and JetBrains with lots of
Mm,
manpower behind, right?
right. I could think of Go as well, because
Go, yeah,
there
you
is
are
a
right.
commercial
Rust maybe at the beginning. Now
Dart.
no more, right? Hmm.
If I think a little bit more, maybe I can come up with some other Swift.
Yeah, Swift. Yeah, Swift is a good one. Swift is a very good one because it's backed by Apple. But it would be interesting to see how many Apple engineers are actually working on Swift right now, right? Because the it would be interesting to see whether, but yeah, interesting. So okay.
But I think the difference is that all the teams have different goals and constraints. So if
Hmm.
you take Java, there is a JVM. JVM is
Hmm.
a huge effort, and yeah, of course they are working on the Java language evolution. But I think the enormous effort goes into the JVM itself. For Kotlin, we are not building our own runtime. Yes, for native, actually, there is a garbage collection that we are implementing ourselves, but our efforts don't go into the runtime that much as for Java. Because if you just think of the JVM, right, we are producing the programming language and the libraries,
Hmm.
and our uh, efforts go to some other activities like multi-platform tooling,
Hmm.
supporting different backends. Compiler infrastructure is a little bit more complex than for
Hmm.
Java because of that, and so on. And the same could be done, could be said by for the other languages. If you have seen the TypeScript documentary that was recently
Hmm.
released, that's also very interesting. What kind of constraints and goals they had when they started the project, and it was similar in a way to Kotlin, right?
Hmm.
Because in that ecosystem we had JavaScript, and they wanted to make JavaScript better, and therefore they came up with a solution that became to be TypeScript, and it's kind of similar to Kotlin because in our ecosystem we had Java, and we
Hmm.
wanted to have something better, and now Kotlin is like in the
Hmm.
beginning, right? In the
Hmm.
beginning, it looks like Java with some sugar
Hmm.
and some additional benefits, but at the end, it still translates into the Java bytecode and runs on the JVM. So that's the similarity I
Sounds like
see.
groovy to me.
Right, pretty much.
Hmm. And what are the reasons why you didn't, why they didn't pick groovy? Because it wouldn't matter actually, right?
Right. I think the first and very obvious reason is that Groovy is dynamically typed.
Ah, okay. You want to aesthetically type. Okay. Hmm.
Right. At that time, Groovy was also a thing, actually a big thing, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and it used to be a superset of Java language.
Hmm.
So
Exactly.
basically, you could take any Java program,
Hmm.
just rename the file and change a few operators. The equals operator is different in Groovy, and I think something else. And then
Yeah.
basically, you would have a valid Groovy program.
Yes. And I remember JetBrains had two compilers, so like a joint compiler, which was able to compile both. This was the IntelliJ, you know. You had a specific compiler, and the compiler understood Groovy and Java at the same time. So you had the best experience in IntelliJ back then. So what I remember,
Right.
and you called it somehow joint compiler or like multi compiler. There was a specific name for it, and
Uh,
mhm,
I don't remember that exactly, but inside IntelliJ we have a tool that's kind of a build system that is optimized for building large code bases with better incremental approach, and that is called JPS. That's open
mhm,
source. You can find it on GitHub, but I don't think you can use it as a standalone tool very easily, and it's tailored for uh, using inside IntelliJ, and probably just had some support for Groovy. I'm not sure.
mhm. Okay, so this was just excursus because I was curious. What about JetBrains as a company? So
Mhm.
back to the room language summit. So you were there. What was your thoughts? You remember? So you saw the company introducing a new language. You said, okay, are you all crazy? Could be useful, or what's your idea?
Well, as I was saying, my general opinion, like
Yeah,
overall, was that
yeah.
I don't really care about the language, the new features or new bells and like
Mm-hmm,
bells and whistles. Um, so the only thing I miss from Java were lambdas actually.
uh-huh,
And but I like the language. I mean, I was always curious about the JVM languages and how they do things, but I was programming in Java myself. Like I
mm-hmm,
thought that serious programming for the real things on top of the JVM should be done in Java. That was
mm-hmm,
my general opinion. But I did like some of the ideas. So when you learn about the ideas, this is what
mm-hmm,
makes you a better programmer
mm-hmm.
in general, and this is why I was looking at the other languages as well.
Okay, interesting. So yeah. Okay, so and then you somehow joined, JetBrains, right?
Yes, since our goal at Zero Turnaround was to build a startup and to build business, and uh, for any startup that has this aim for exit,
Mm-hmm,
either you go to an IPO or acquisition. In 2017, we were acquired by not so well known company in the JVM ecosystem called Rogue Wave,
mm-hmm,
which was reacquired by Perforce later. So basically, the product and everything we did at Zero Turnaround is now owned by Perforce. Uh, Basically, right after that, I joined JetBrains
mm-hmm,
uh, as a developer advocate and first the TeamCity
mm-hmm,
product. So I was advocating for TeamCity and helping the team to collect feedback from the users and
mm-hmm.
see where to improve the product. And there was just a coincidence of different changes and events that led me to Kotlin team.
Mm-hmm. But,
S-
but now you are evangelist of DevRel for Kotlin.
mhm.
So you gathered maybe insights because you had to, right? So you spent
Yeah.
some time with Kotlin engineers. So so now, what is the unique? So there was the article from Dimitri you mentioned that you
Hmm.
say, okay, we can do this because we have the technology. This is true. So was at the beginning like a marketing gig, to show we can do something like this, or why? Or you needed the language for something very specific, or what was the motivation?
The other motivation that I didn't mention was, and it's still written in the blog post, is that
Hmm,
we expect Kotlin to drive the sales of IntelliJ ideas. So if we build a good language that people like,
hmm.
they will trust us more and buy our products. That's the general idea behind the project
Which
itself.
is very reasonable.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
this is very valid point and very reasonable because, yeah, Kotlin runs the best on IntelliJ right now.
Right. And people started to like the language. And one of the results that people liked the language so much, they were pressing on Google to adopt it for Android development
Okay.
because the Java was lagging behind on Android. They
Hmm,
didn't have lambdas and so on, so they were actually using the older version of the language there. And in 2017, Google said, "Okay." now you can
Hmm.
do that, and we're supporting it. And later they said that, okay, actually all of the Android development is going to Kotlin, and this is where this uh, great event happens, right? People started to think that Kotlin is only for Android. There's like
Hmm.
we had to do a lot of work to actually still change this perception.
Hmm. This is also what I'm saying. What I not this. What I'm saying is what would be interesting. What happens when Google drops Kotlin? Will it remain popular? This was what I'm also saying. This is an interesting thought experiment because Android is huge, and not even not only Kotlin, but to my understanding, the JetBrains Studio for development is also the IDE is the official one, right? For Android
Right.
development. So you get the entire package, which is great. So what you already have is a huge community which uses. I wanted to say have to use, but actually they wanted to use, but it would had to use because it is the official environment, like Swift on Apple or Objective C back then, which was not that interesting, right? So
Right.
to develop to develop on Android. And yeah, and this is the interesting. But what I noticed the last 2 years, I get lots of questions about my opinion in Kotlin, not from Android developers, but Java developers became curious, and I'm absolutely not interested in the language features. But what you already mentioned is very interesting: is the WebAssembly and the platform, native platform, which is really interesting for me because this is the first thing which I say for me, it is the added value. This is what Java cannot do, and
Hmm.
Kotlin could, right? Or Java could do with GraalVM, but not like it is not like design goal to do that. And this was the interesting part of Kotlin when I say, okay, this is actually an interesting added value where you just leave Java aside and you can be happy without Java. Because for me, I'm really not interested to learn another language which runs on JVM because then I use Java, but use a different language like Swift, which is completely different. So this is what I'm interested in. Or back then, I wanted to learn Ruby, had no time, but I would now. I would like don't like I would like to understand Python, but absolutely no motivation to do that. But Ruby was interesting back then. It looked nice, fresh. The entire design system around was interesting. The thoughts, the aesthetics were interesting. And now the same Kotlin is also nice branding. It looks good with your tools, and yeah. So maybe okay, back then it's interesting. So it was a marketing gig, of course. So they can sell more IntelliJs because, or IntelliCase than with Kotlin, because of because because Java was not good enough. Because if there are no lambdas, and you had the experience for other languages, I guess you knew that lambdas are important. Maybe from .NET back then, there was the link and the language integrated query, and this was a huge push to Java because okay, C# can do and we cannot. So
Hmm.
maybe this was right the initial.
There,
Mhm.
there are many small details that converge all together. But let's try to answer your this global question of the existential question:
Yeah.
would Kotlin be popular if today, let's say, Android ecosystem disappears?
Yes.
So for us, you and me both, we
Hmm.
are actually Java skeptics, right? Or let's say
Hmm.
Java champions. Um, and then I still think that a skeptic lives in me somewhere inside. So I'm in right to say and criticize something about Kotlin.
Hmm.
And what kind of benefits would Kotlin give me for
Hmm.
building programs, and what would be my motivation there?
Hmm.
I also, like you, I'm like you, don't care much about the syntax sugar
Hmm.
when I'm talking about producing the apps, but I do care about the things that make my job safer. So enable me to make less mistakes,
Hmm.
or prevent me from doing the mistakes, or somehow improving my work or speeding it up. Uh, in Kotlin, there are still things or features that do that. I mean, null safety is often perceived as an alternative for using optional in Java, which is not
Okay, how
correct.
it works in Kotlin? Go ahead. So now we have nullability and null safety.
Right.
So
That's
what is it
that is
for
a
Java developers?
compiler feature. That is a
Hmm.
compiler feature. So you have a mirroring of any type that you have in your program that can include null and by default cannot include null.
Hmm.
So the compiler can give you the feedback immediately that
Hmm.
a value, dereferencing a value or calling a method on an object can produce a null pointer exception. And that is a compiler error instead of some warning or some inspection or a runtime issue. Because for me, in my head, if I see a null pointer exception in a log file,
Hmm.
that immediately means that this is a programmer's fault. It's
Hmm.
not a fault in the database. It's not a fault with data or anything else. It's the programmer's fault,
Yes.
right? So that's a single important feature for me in Kotlin that makes my program safer. And why is it different from optional? Because optional is a library feature, and you need to
I'm
have
with
a
you.
discipline to
I'm
use
with you
the
with the null
best
pointer,
practices.
but I have to say the null pointer exception are not that common in the code bases we have on the application servers right now. And maybe the reason is because I'm mostly working with request scoped these days. Something comes and goes. If this were a Swing application with a singleton, which runs all the time, like IntelliJ, I think it would
Mhm.
be a complete different story. Because for now, we have the request and response. And if there is an NPE, it is incredibly easy to spot. And what I'm struggling right now is not even the problem is developers I work with, they love optional and they overuse optional everywhere, no,
Mhm.
just because it's cool. And what the next problem I have is or else throw. They have the optional, and then they say, okay, I have no idea other than or else throw, and then suddenly I get 500 errors, which are worse than the null pointers because now I get 500. I have no idea where they're coming from, and they are coming from optional or else throw.
Right.
So I know what. So from my perspective, Java should have nullability if it's possible. The compiler should do this. So there is no feature of having something. I would say null pointer exception is not a feature from my perspective,
Hmm.
but it not causes a lot of harm in my projects right now. So this is not like I have to use Kotlin in order to make me faster because it doesn't happen very often. And but I'm with you. This is it has to, and I'm pretty sure that Java 25 or Java 30 will have null safety. So I
Well,
think that
if
it will happen.
right, there was an update on Project Valhalla, if I'm correct, that actually mentions that they have extended the scope for the project.
They have to do it also for performance reasons and for they have multiple reasons to do that. So I think it will
Mhm.
come in one point of time. But do you remember there were annotations where IntelliJ understood the not now,
Right.
and you get almost similar behavior in there were
This
IntelliJ.
is this is part of the story because if we implement nullability or null safety as is, you know,
Mhm.
like the first. Okay, I explained a little bit different way. So Kotlin did not exist in isolation. It still has to interoperate with Java,
Mhm.
and we obviously would use all the Java SDK classes, right? So, like the
Mhm.
string, whatever,
Mhm.
and then you have to make a choice, a decision, whether where this line runs the nullability for nullability. Would
Mhm.
any of the Java types be automatically considered as nullable or
Mhm.
not?
Mhm.
The very strict approach would be to say that any Java class
Mhm.
is a nullable type. And that
Mhm.
was the initial design decision. And it turned out to be very impractical because on the JVM, we would still use all the Java frameworks. Or let's say you want to build Java EE app or
Mhm.
Spring app, whatever, with Kotlin. And then you would have to add a lot of verbosity and null checks in your program. So it's impractical. It's a strict decision, but then it's impractical. We had to revert this back. And now there's a notion of platform types. So it is in the Kotlin program, the Java type would be considered as so-called platform type. So we think that it doesn't have a null, but it can.
Hmm.
And this is where this, where this sentiment goes for developers who hear that Kotlin doesn't have null pointer exceptions, but they still get them, and then they consider it as a broken promise. Uh, the thing is, we work with the real world, right? We still
Hmm.
work with the databases. The compiler gives you a tool that you can build, or can leverage null safety feature from the compiler, but you still have to build the boundary yourself.
Hmm.
There is a boundary, there is a nullable world, and inside, on my side, there is no nulls anymore, right? It doesn't
Hmm.
matter if you work with some external data or with a Java framework. So for making the UX for the developers better, when working with Java APIs, it would be nice if the Java APIs could somehow declare that they
Hmm.
can return a nullable value or a non-nullable value. How to do that? There is a standard, JSR 305,
Hmm.
that doesn't have an implementation, but it says what kind of annotations you may have in
Hmm.
your package to declare those nullable values. And there is a list of packages that provide those annotations for GSR 305. And those are the annotations from Spring. So Spring has this package, JetBrains annotations have this package, and so on. And a lot of frameworks, including Spring, have leveraged this fact that you can annotate your public APIs with these annotations, and Kotlin compiler can then check for those annotations when using Java frameworks or libraries from Kotlin programs. So it's just a compiler flag. So you can say whether or not it should be a warning or an error if you're
Hmm.
using some input value or a return value as a null, and then it feels like transparent to you as a Kotlin developer when working with Java libraries.
The interesting part, I'm using with AWS CDK and SDK, and they are using the JetBrains annotation. So it's interesting. So you are a bit crazy because you're depending, the namespace, but it works for them. But what I remember, the JSR 305, because I wanted to ask you about that. What
Hmm.
I remember, Java One Talks by a nice professor, and this was, I just look it up. This was William Pugh, I think Pugh, and he introduced the annotations at Java One.
Hmm.
So I like, the and so I this is why I know them, and the IntelliJ. So you will find the old talks. So it's really nice guys. I'm really curious what he's doing right now. But yeah, exactly, non null, the annotation, the one. And there was a lots of movements back then, 2007 8,
Hmm.
and the reminder is what you are doing. You are using, the so the IntelliJ took over, which makes sense because you're building the compiler, so you can react to the annotations. But the discussion about false promise, what happened to me is, I remember at one conference I said, EJBs are thread safe, and they are kind of, because if there is a threat, you get an instance, and the
Hmm.
instance never shared. Very similar to AWS Lambda. And I was in a project then, and someone came to me and said, "Hey, look, you said EJBs are thread safe, but they are not." It's like, okay, what are you talking about? And what they did, they had a singleton, and all EJBs access the singleton, and they say, "You see, it is not thread safe." It's like, yeah, but I mean, this is no magic, right? It's what they can do. This is a similar story to Kotlin. So if the Kotlin compiler is null safe, and you're calling code which is not null safe, there's no magic. I think, and even you could even get null pointer inside the other code. So I mean, there's it doesn't matter if you call something out, you have a problem. It's the same, functional programming. You can have pure functions, but if the pure function calls a file system, it is no more pure. But it's not a fault of the language. It's you did something which is contradicts the ideas, right?
Right, and this is like you. It's a global problem, and
Yes.
with those annotations on let's say larger time scale, If the library authors, framework authors apply them, it kind of improves the average temperature for Kotlin developers when working on the JVM platform. So in the long run, we actually improve the UX for them by a lot. But going back again to your existential question, right? Um, so those little things, like little improvements that Kotlin offers for Java developers, every single one of them does not offer enough for them motivation for them to actually go and switch right to Kotlin. But altogether, they produce a very nice UX and a nice looking language that also might not be kind of convincing enough yet to switch. But there are multiple things I can think of. First of all, the new developers, the new generation of developers, even if they look at two languages that are same on the features, but one of them looks sexier, then they would choose the other one, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's a larger time scale, so it takes time. The other thing that I have seen, you asked me if I talked to different companies and different developers. Yes, I like in the past 3 years, especially at the COVID time when I had to do a lot of webinars online. Um, Surprisingly, I had a lot of webinars with banks, and they are integrating Kotlin and start using it for just server-side programming.
But this is not a brainer. Actually, you're right. So if I could introduce Kotlin everywhere because my line would be, we have less null pointer exception is more stable, and they are no, and if you have IntelliJ and this is nice tooling, so there are no more questions left, right? So I mean, this is like this is an argument which is unbeatable for management. So they say, okay, go ahead, you're right. So this is like you can argument this is Java next or whatever. So this is maybe why lots of banks and insurances are just using, because I think lots of programmers just bored. They see you at conference and they say, okay, let's learn the Kotlin thing. And how to introduce Kotlin, I would do this the same. It's like, look, the Java, you saw the null pointer exception. There's a huge problem. Use Kotlin and it solves the problem, right? This would be the brute force, introduction of Kotlin. But this is for me still, I don't like the entire conversation, right? Because what I observe, I spend all my time in projects and consulting and in code reviews, and the arguments and what happens afterwards, they never align. So this is what I remember at the beginning. Spring was introduced, and they say, okay, we have XML configuration, and we are able to replace everything. And this is very important because the architect has the power, to control the dependencies. And what I observed, no architect controlled the dependencies, and they never replace anything. So this was okay. This was a huge amount of work for nothing, right? So there was, and the XML was larger than Java, and as I called, you are all crazy. So without me, I don't get it, right? The next thing was testability. We need dependency injection to write unit tests and stuff like that. Then they got dependency injection, and there were no tests. It's okay. Then if you already wanted to have dependency injection, now you have it. So now write tests, no tests. And this repeats over and over again. Then the functional programming with Java, with Lambda, everyone wanted to have Lambdas. And I say, okay, this is nice, but we have different problems in projects, right? So there's not necessary that the for loops are ugly. We had problems with synchronization, statics, memory problems. The Lambda was I was like, if Lambda will come on top of that, then it's problematic. And I don't know whether you see still code. I have still code reviews with Lambda now. I mean the Java Lambda, right? So the streams with Lambda, then for each and huge code block, which is hard to test and debug. So this is not really functional. Or you have a map, stream.map, and in the map there are 10 lines with custom code. I say, okay, this is really bad. So I would say this is not necessarily the feature. So what I'm saying is that if you have Java, you can be happy, right? You can write, nice code, and there is no reason to go to Kotlin. But what's interesting in Kotlin is actually the platform thing, which Java cannot do at all. I mean, the small improvements are nice but dangerous because Java also evolves, and
Hmm.
there will be less and less reasons to use Kotlin. So I'm pretty sure. So right now it's appealing, next year less appealing, and I don't know whether you can invent that many new features which make Java obsolete. So the problem is, in one point of time we have a lots of stuff which makes sense. Other, this is
Totally.
interesting. Yeah.
Totally. I think even the set of features that Java already has, there's not so many shortcomings in the syntax and the language
Hmm.
features for professional developers to build the apps. That's not a
Hmm.
problem at all.
Hmm.
Of course, there are a lot of features that Kotlin could implement that Java would never implement.
Hmm.
And there are some features in Kotlin that Java would never implement as well, like properties, for instance.
Hmm.
Um,
What are
for
properties like you could get and set a generated for you,
Yeah,
like in JavaScript?
yeah, like not just generated, but when you access a property of a class, then a getter would be invoked if it
Yeah, like
exists.
JavaScript. This is like JavaScript. It's great.
Hmm. Hmm. This is something that Java would not implement without breaking the backwards compatibility, right? But that's those other language features. They're applicable to something else. They are either applicable to really providing the different way of to reason about the programs,
Hmm.
and this is not the problem for Java developers. This is something that other language users may have, like, or wishes, right?
Hmm.
If we want Python developers to come to JVM, or C Sharp developers, like that's also one of the trends that I see. .NET developers coming to the JVM, and I think they will just commit a suicide earlier than they will start programming in Java, and Kotlin is
Yes,
their
you're right.
savior.
In JavaScript, what I already heard, JavaScript conversation between JavaScript programmers who said, okay, Kotlin is great. And I asked them, but it runs on JVM. I say, no, Kotlin is great, right? So they are not even what this is what
Right.
absolutely. So yeah.
So attracting more developers from the other technologies to the JVM is something that Kotlin can offer, you know,
Hmm.
in our ecosystem. And also the other trend that I didn't mention is that we do have a huge Kotlin presence on Android and mobile
Hmm.
now, with Kotlin multi-platform expanding to the iOS developers as well. But Android developers also switch places, also switch their, or kind of change their career sometimes, and have motivation to write backend.
Hmm.
So they go to the JVM world, and they already have a tool for that. They have Kotlin.
Hmm.
So there's no huge barrier for them to enter this kind of development anymore. So in the long run, if we try to answer the initial question again, say if Android disappears today,
Hmm.
there is a long running process of uh, people coming to Kotlin for JVM, because they want to come to the JVM, and they just have this choice now. They are
Hmm.
new to the JVM, but they have the choice to take Java, which is slightly more verbose. Yes, it has all the same features. Let's imagine that they are equal on the features as checkboxes. Yes, the features are slightly differently implemented, because like if you take every single feature, there will be a difference.
Hmm.
Um, but this slow process of increasing number of users for Kotlin
Hmm.
is kind of ensuring that in the long run, Kotlin will not disappear, even if Android disappears tomorrow.
Yes, this is what I also believe. And what makes sense to me right now is the fleet, because it looks at Visual Studio Code, which is more appealing for JavaScript and Python developers than IntelliJ is. Actually, this makes sense now, because I always wondered, it was a discussion from last time. But to better understand it now, just from for me is, so the Kotlin has a compiler, right? So the compiler compiles the Kotlin code now to what? To
The on a very high level. Kotlin compiler consists of a front end that parses your program,
Hmm.
produces internal representation, internal format for the analysis, and then feeds this internal format into some of the code generators. That is a code generator for JVM, so produces the bytecode.
Hmm.
Native that produces the LLVM bytecode.
Hmm.
It can be a generator for JavaScript. It can be generator for WebAssembly bytecode.
Hmm.
So any of the outputs you're interested in.
Okay. So now start with the JVM, the most boring one. So you have the front end. This is it reads the source code and then creates an intermediate representation, and then there's a code generator which generates the bytecode, I guess, right? Not this
Hmm.
Java source code, bytecode.
Yes.
But you could generate Java source as well, right? Would be fun.
Um,
I
we
mean, if you
could.
can decompile the bytecode, you could decompile the bytecode and see what happens. I mean,
Right. Some of the data that is encoded into the bytecode into the classes would not be decompiled by an average Java decompiler.
okay.
But yes, the built-in there is a built-in tool that allows you to observe the bytecode produced by the compiler and then decompile it back to Java classes. It's slightly cryptic, I would
Yeah,
say,
sure.
but you can still make sense of it. Yes.
Okay, so this just to understanding. Okay, and now if I use in Kotlin, let's say list, so the JVM representation of the, would you are you using actually Java collections or you have your own libraries?
We have a lot of extensions on top of Java collections.
Mhm.
So I
But what is
th-
the canonical way? So what's interesting me, if I would be the perfect, I'm the Anton and I'm programming my circle automator, right? So if I would do this, what would be the canonical or the best practice in Kotlin? Just use Kotlin packages, or what is the idea to use? Mhm.
today when I'm trying to do that, I'm using a library that was actually created by Google for Android, and it was ported to the other platforms by a team at JetBrains.
Mhm.
That's called Compose. So
Mhm.
on Android, it's called Jetpack Compose,
Mhm.
and on other platforms, we call it Compose Multi-Platform. That proposes an interesting programming model compared
This is like
to
Swift UI, but what I'm talking is,
yeah.
this is very similar. We use this is one step further. But let's say
Hmm.
I need a collection. Would I pick a native list, Java array list? Right? I'm Java developer. Array list, linked list, hash map, a map of list
Ooh.
of what I do. Am I using Kotlin data structures or Java data structures?
In fact, you like in the very basic case, you don't even think about that because there are factory functions. Let's call them like that: list
Hmm.
of or mutable list of. So
Hmm.
that's the first distinction you would notice when using Kotlin collections is that there are two distinct types of
Hmm.
collections: mutable and immutable ones.
Okay.
And yeah, like you don't think of array list or you don't think of linked list
Yeah,
when
but
using
we are think
Kotlin.
about array and linked is because of performance usually, right? So if I
Right.
append something at the beginning or the end, so this is why there are different lists in Java.
Correct.
And in Kotlin, what would be
that
I
that's uh, that's tuned for you by the standard
ah
library.
okay, so it's more like Pythonic way or whatever. You say okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's simple code and compiler tries to optimize. So the mindset is a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you use Java behind the scenes or not, it doesn't matter for the Kotlin compiler. It's just
Right.
I get something back. Maybe it is backed on the JVM or not. And this was boring in the other languages for me because I used EXO at the end of the day exactly the same libraries as before. So like, what's the
Correct.
point? To have a little different syntax is really boring. I mean, so
you
come on,
you
this is
you
like
can you can still turn back and say no, I want an array list from Java, and then you would still call it directly.
mhm.
But when you normally program in an idiomatic Kotlin, you would just use those factory functions, create an instance, and don't even think
And
what
doc
kind of.
and if you do socket or date or whatever, what do you have else? No date.
For data libraries, one of the core libraries that we built at JetBrains, because it needs to be multi-platform. So there is a wrapper that actually, yes, it delegates to Java datetime
Mhm.
on the JVM platform, but it either provides an implementation or a wrapper on the other platforms.
Hmm.
So the core libraries is something that is built by the Kotlin team,
Hmm.
the essential libraries. And whenever we build libraries, we try to make them multi-platform immediately, so that whenever you build an app, let's say for a mobile app for Android, so you would be able to take it to iOS with the least effort.
Okay. So what do you have? You have like what Java had at the beginning, like so core libraries, the Kotlin, and they were built by JetBrains. And this is like a wrapper of existing libraries in other platforms, right? It could be JVM, it could be something different on iOS or Android. And what packages do you have? So, like in Java, we have Java Util, we have Date. What what is
Um,
available on Kotlin, roughly, just roughly for Java developers? So,
Date and time serialization is a very popular part of
mhm,
core libraries. Coroutines
mhm.
is also like a multi-platform core library. Um, what else was there? So the three biggest ones are the datetime, serialization, and coroutines. There are some smaller ones for improving some very specific cases, like there is an atomic foo, like for implementing the atomic. So it's like
Mhm.
support for coroutines basically. There's something else as well. Like it's about 10 libraries, and some of them
Okay.
not really libraries, but more like
Mhm.
helpers or
Mhm.
even tools.
But for Java developer, I will find whatever I like, not whatever. What's the most common cases from Java are covered by Kotlin, I guess. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible to use Android, right? I mean,
Sure,
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So now it becomes interesting because the Kotlin compiler is written in Java, I guess, right?
It's now it's written in Kotlin.
Wow, this is cool.
This
So
is
they
a
code.
this is a
Uh-huh.
validation for any programming languages, as far as I know. Like if the compiler of that language is written
Yeah.
by its own language, yes.
So this is what becomes interesting. So what it means for me is I could use Kotlin without caring about Java, right? So
Hmm.
the Kotlin compiler is already no Java but Kotlin. So I don't have to install Java at all if I use the other backend. So now we talk about native. So I could use Kotlin.
Hmm.
This is the front end is Kotlin, and it will generate then native code for
For the
which platforms?
for target platform, for Windows, for Mac OS, for iOS, for Linux.
Mhm. So for let's say for Mac, so I have the Kotlin compiler. There's the front end. The backend generates machine code or
Mhm.
executable for the Mac, and I don't have any Java installed on my machine except for JetBrains internal, but which I don't care. But for the language, is Java independent, JVM independent,
Right.
and this makes me happy because this is like I could use a language which is a true language and not just syntactic sugar around Java, which I'm absolutely not interested in.
Hmm.
And with the cross compilation, I get something similar to GraalVM, but it is more like ground up, created to have.
I think the difference there is that GraalVM enables you to keep all the benefits of the Java platform, but produce something that is that gives you a value like fast start and optimized memory footprint.
Mhm.
But you still can use all the Java libraries, right? And yes, there is a trade-off. You need to get rid of reflection. With Kotlin, you sacrifice the ecosystem, you sacrifice the libraries, and the library ecosystem for Kotlin native isn't that huge as for Java. Then what would be the solution? Either to build the libraries yourself or find the existing library from the limited list of available libraries for
Mhm.
multi-platform, or try to integrate with some C code, right? That's also possible. Um, and
But on Mac, I could.
but the
But on
benefit,
Mac, but in Mac, this is LLVM. You could use whatever available in Swift.
yes, for that you need. Uh, yes, it's possible, but
Yeah.
currently the bridge to Swift is through the C Objective C interop,
Okay.
and this is something we have to work on. So there would
Okay.
be like a direct mapping on
Okay.
Swift syntax. But the benefit from getting the binary, like in this way is that the binary is very small and
Mm-hmm.
much smaller than the GraalVM native
Mm-hmm.
image, and the fast startup. Right, the startup time would be almost equal. So the size is different. And now the question would be why? What is the motivation for you
Mm-hmm.
as a Java developer who can achieve fast startup with GraalVM native image and reasonably small footprint to switch to something native that produces a smaller binary? So it must be a device that lacks of memory, but then it leads you to this world of IoT and embedded development. And this is a completely different market where you don't really have that many standards, and the different uh, vendors actually dictate
Mm-hmm.
how and what you should be using, and therefore mostly they use C, right,
Mm-hmm.
for building something on top of
Mm-hmm.
these applications. So this is something that I personally don't have much exposure to. I don't really know the main why they are doing it and what kind of devices there are, what are the limitations and constraints. So the question would still hold: why would you need to produce a server-side application using Kotlin native for a machine that has enough memory,
Mm-hmm.
and you can do that with GraalVM native image without sacrificing the ecosystem?
Mm-hmm. What why I would use it? Can you give you some examples? Because I'm more interested in the native stuff.
I
Yes.
I can only think of serverless. So
Yes, exactly. Serverless,
optimizing for serverless.
and there's also something called Lambda on Edge, where you can run, on not in the data center, almost outside data center, very near to the client, in
Hmm.
a cloud front, for instance. This is a subset of JavaScript. You cannot run Java, but you can run so minimized JavaScript or even WebAssembly comes more and more. And if you use Kotlin, right, and you can cross compile the WebAssembly, it is for me I would like, rather to use learn Kotlin than other languages, which Rust, let's say, which cross compiled, because I mean, in Kotlin I could decide later maybe do something with Kotlin instead of Java just for fun. So this is, the effort is not lost.
Hmm.
And so the WebAssembly is a huge one, because WebAssembly will also run instead of Docker containers. So everyone is working on it. And I think this would be a huge push for Kotlin. If this works well for Java developers, they could really write something in Java, copy it over to Kotlin, and then, of course, optimize it and migrate. And don't expect that it works out of the box. I mean, it never works out of the box. And then, but you get at the end of the day WebAssembly, which you could actually run in the browser and on the server at the same time. So this is, I would say, interesting, really interesting part. And I also expect, to have, the entire machine learning stuff also be somehow, the extensions. Why not to have WebAssemblies? I think this will also happen in one point of time. And
Hmm.
so I'm really excited about the native part. And if I would build, UI on Mac, even if it's limited, I would say interesting, right? And if it's iOS development with Kotlin, also sounds interesting. I have to say, I'm really sad that the app code was cancelled by IntelliJ. So I always wanted to do more with that, right? So this was one of the things I always interested in. The not necessarily IntelliJ, rather than Data Grip, nice one, or the app code or the documentation. Forgot the name. The documentation tool you have.
Writer side, it
Right,
is.
exactly. So this is the MPS. So lots of cool stuff there, and yeah. So yeah.
If you were interested in app code, actually, you will be interested in Fleet,
Hmm.
because all the technical efforts are now being migrated into Fleet for supporting Swift with Kotlin
Okay.
multi-platform. So Fleet is like, we did just a recent announcement, and we just run a few streams with demonstrating how it works. So there is a Kotlin multi-platform support in Fleet, and that includes navigating
Hmm.
from between the two code bases in different languages,
Mhm.
And yeah, so our app code effort was discontinued some time ago. Like there are multiple reasons behind that. I would not dive into that,
Mhm.
but the efforts are not wasted. I mean, now we have an opportunity to merge them and provide a good experience
Mhm.
inside a new tool with a new architecture. It's not just replacement for VS Code. The sentiment that it looks like a VS Code, lighter weight, and so on, comes from the visual perspective, because the designers are using very similar
Mhm.
approaches at the same point of time. So if we take different UIs that exist today that people know, GitHub, for instance,
Mhm.
our designer who worked on the new UI for IntelliJ has shown us that if you apply some of the principles that all the designers use, you can get a VS Code looking UI
Mhm.
basically for any application.
Mhm.
So she demonstrated that
Yeah.
on GitHub.
Mhm.
Uh, so because of the design system, it looks the same, but the architecture is different. The purpose is different. The of course, I mean the purpose, the lighter weight or the more responsive UI is also the common goal, but you can account it as a purpose. But Fleet started as an effort with an idea that how would we build a new IDE if we started today
Mhm.
with the new requirements, with the new knowledge, how the software engineering changed in the past
Mhm.
20 years and so on.
Mhm. Cool.
Right. So this is how it looks like now.
I think we covered Kotlin quite a lot, right? So it was always
We
something
did,
missing.
we did, we did.
So very good. So I hope this was actually a fair introduction to Kotlin, objective, I would say. So what are the advantages and yeah, I'm really happy and thank you actually for joining Airhacks FM once again.
Thanks for inviting me.
Where people can find you on the internet?
Anton Arhipov is on Twitter, or they call it X now.
Mhm.
And yeah, so that's my primary network that I'm
And Blue
using.
Sky, you also Blue Sky, right? So I found.
Yes, I created an account on Blue Sky, but I don't see that much of activity there. I still try to post there. Maybe it will get a more popular network in
What I
some
see
time.
is in Blue Sky that it's gaining momentum recently. Is there are lots of Java developers there and lots of interesting posts. So there's like a mini community, but somehow interactive. Let's see what happens. So it seems like more and more Java developers are joining. This is my impression.
Right. I tried Mastodon as well, but somehow it didn't grow on me. Uh, I don't know for what reason, but Blue Sky I'm using. So
Yeah, perfect,
now the two social networks concurrently. Let's see.
perfect.
Let's see how it turns out.
So then, thank you.
And thank you.